Hi folks, this is Tabiasobi, and today I'll be going over the 30-second Barrage Demon of Azur, Reisalyn Stout, or Ryza for short. Yeah, so I'll be going over her barrage mechanics and also compare her standard gear versus event gear loadouts. So the Azur and Atelier Ryza collaboration event, The Alchemist and the Archipelago of Secrets, is finally here. Finally! Can you tell that I'm a fan of the Ryza game series? Yeah, so I decided to come out of YouTube hibernation to share my thoughts about Ryza and her mechanics, as well as show the results of my testing while I tried to figure out the best loadouts for her. By the way, I must say that this is arguably the best Azur collab event yet. Prior to that, the SSSS Gridman event was actually my favorite collab event, but this one builds on some of the new things that they introduced in that event, and adds a lot of creativity and new mechanics as well. So I'm hoping that the dev team actually brings some of the same stuff to regular events from this point on, just to make them a little bit more interesting, especially if you've been playing the game for a long time. Anyway, back to Reisalyn Stout. So Ryza is a light cruiser who happens to have some special quirks. One is the ability to use AP, or action points, which is a mechanic shared by all the Atelier Ryza collab characters. Basically, Ryza and her friends can build up action points during battle, which is indicated in the top left of the screen, and then use those points to trigger special attacks, just like they do in the JRPG that they're based from. I highly recommend the first two Ryza games, by the way, and I have a link to my written review of both games in the video description, which I did as part of my regular job as a business and tech reporter for the Reno Gazette-Journal. Now, on top of being able to use action points, Ryza has one more unique quirk that actually separates her from the rest of the Atelier Ryza characters in Azur. See, in addition to being able to equip a main gun, a torpedo, and anti-air gun, and 2 aux equipment, or auxiliary equipment, like other light cruisers, Ryza can actually swap the aforementioned torpedo and AA slots for 2 auxiliary slots instead. That means she can equip a total of 4 auxiliary equipment, instead of just the regular 2. If that sounds kind of familiar, that's because Rika from last year's Gridman event had the exact same concept, except Rika could equip up to 5 aux gear instead of just 4. That was actually one of the reasons why I love Rika as a character in Azur, in addition to the fact that I'm also a Gridman fan. And just like with Rika, there are also a bunch of exclusive event gear that you can get for Ryza, which brings up a couple of questions. One is, what aux gear should you put on Ryza? So there are 11 special Atelier Ryza gear from this event, and since she can only equip 4, you might be wondering which ones should she equip. Actually, the answer is pretty self-explanatory, since it's actually written in the description of the items. Reading for the win. Yeah, so they're pretty self-explanatory, but let's go over them for clarity's sake. And then after that, the next question is, should you put event aux gear on Ryza, or just equip her with standard non-event gear instead? Depending on your decision, this affects Ryza's ability to trigger barrages and skills, so it's something you definitely want to think about if you plan to use Ryza and then level her up all the way. Anyway, to find out the answer, I did a lot of testing in the last few days, mostly out of my own curiosity, but I thought it might also be good to share the results with all of you as well. I figure that it would be especially helpful for newer players who might be feeling lost from all the mechanics and other stuff that they need to learn and keep track of, so hopefully this also helps newcomers out. Yeah, so for slot 1, what main gun should you put on Ryza? Yeah, so unlike Rika, you will need to put a standard main gun on Ryza. So just pick from the good old staples for light cruisers, preferably a faster firing option so she can gain AP points more quickly for triggering her skills. Here are my recommendations. So if you just want the absolute best, then you can just stick in the prototype quadruple 152mm rainbow gun. Okay, I'm gonna start dropping millimeter when I mention these guns. Just because it's like a tongue twister. Hey, work smarter, not harder. Yeah, so the quad 152 rainbow gun is currently what's considered BIS, or BIS, or best in slot right now. And again, most folks either have just one of these, or maybe even none, since they take forever to get blueprints for. If that's the case, here are some more realistic options. So for gold gear, if you want to use an HE, or high explosive gun, to burn enemies, you can use either the prototype triple 152 DP Mark 17, the triple 152 B38 Mark 5, or the prototype triple 155 Kai. And then for an armor-piercing option, you can use the triple 152 Mark 25 AP. In fact, you might notice that I use this gun in my footage as far as my testing, and that's due to a couple of reasons. So one is that I wanted to see how often Ryza procced her burns with her skills alone, as opposed to her gun, so I didn't want to use an HE gun to interfere with my testing. And then moving on as far as main gun options, if you're a new player and don't have access to any of these gold guns, would be the tried and true Purple Twin 150 TBT SK C36. So that one's easy to get and it's a pretty good starter. Now let's move on to Ryza's auxiliary or aux equipment. Note that all of these trigger an item attack when activated, which do damage based on Ryza's firepower or FP stat. So in slot 2 you want to put in the Grand Bomb. This aux equipment can be synthesized or crafted through Ryza's Atelier during the Collab event, so go get it before the event ends. To acquire the special module that you need for making it, you will need to finish stage TH3 10 times, and that would be the special harvesting stage, not the regular T3 stage. And then after that you can get the module for the Grand Bomb from the request board. In addition to doing an item attack, the Grand Bomb also triggers a skill called Inflict Burns 10 seconds after a battle starts. This also marks an enemy with the item mark debuff that I mentioned earlier for about 5 seconds. By the way, the burn effect also lasts for 5 seconds. How convenient. Now the reason why you want this on your second slot is because it gives Ryza a special secondary equipment when placed in that particular position. The in-game description says secondary gun, but the datamine and wiki says it provides special torpedo equipment, plus the Grand Bomb actually gives plus 10 evasion and plus 35 torpedo stats when enhanced to level 10, so the special equipment being a torpedo makes sense. By the way, Ryza also has a ghost torpedo, regardless of whether or not the second slot is empty. I know because I personally tested her slot without anything in it, and she could still fire torpedoes. I'm assuming that this gear actually upgrades those torpedoes, which according to the datamine is similar to a quad magnetic torpedo. And then for slot 3, you want to put the Loadout. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Whatever language it is. Kinda sounds German, but I'm not sure. With apologies to German listeners. Yeah, so this is another aux item that can be crafted at the Atelier during the event. To acquire the special module that you need for making it, you will need to finish stage TH2 10 times. Noticing a pattern here. You can then get the module for the Loadout from the request board. In addition to doing an item attack again, this aux gear triggers the skill Senselessness 20 seconds after a battle starts. Note the times for the triggering of the skills, because they kind of factor into why she ends up being a 30-second barrage demon, and by that I'm talking about Ryza. Yeah, so Senselessness decreases the crit rate of enemies hit by 10% for 5 seconds. And then like the Grand Bomb, it also inflicts an item mark debuff for 5 seconds, and then this particular gear provides 55 additional AA stat points when maxed out to level 10. Putting this in Ryza's third slot also gives her a special anti-air gun. Supposedly, this AA gun is similar to the sextuple Bofors, according to info from the data mining of the event. And then you have 2 more special aux items that you can use for the last 2 slots. These are not slot specific, like the Grand Bomb or the Loadout, so feel free to put them anywhere in the last 2 slots. First is the Luft, which lets Ryza break the maximum wind skill 25 seconds after a battle starts. Nothing like breaking maximum wind. Once again, it also inflicts the item mark debuff on enemies for 5 seconds, and the Luft also provides 400 extra HP points, plus 4 speed stats when enhanced to level 10. And then last but not least is the Crystal Ice Bomb. This aux gear lets Ryza perform the slowdown skill 15 seconds after a battle starts. Enemies hit will have their speed reduced by 30% for 5 seconds. Once again, they will be inflicted with the item mark debuff for 5 seconds as well. As far as stats, the Crystal Ice Bomb provides 34 extra evasion points when enhanced to level 10. Now while these aux equipment look inferior to say the Repair Toolkit and the High Performance Hydraulic Steering Gear or Washing Machine from a pure numbers standpoint, the main reason to use them is the synergy that they provide with other special Ryza gear, as well as the skills of other Ryza characters, whether you're running 1 or 2 extra Ryza ships in your fleet, or a full Ryza ship fleet. Yeah, so having all 4 of these particular aux gear equipped on Ryza, for example, gives her a 10% bonus to her firepower and torpedo stats. It also lets her unleash the Core Drive 4-star Aurora attack 30 seconds after a battle starts, which does some pretty good damage. And then the extra item marking debuff opportunities that they provide also makes enemies more susceptible to the skills of other Ryza characters, like I said, if you decide to add them to your fleet. That being said, the proof is in the pudding, so I decided to test 3 different loadouts on the same stage. Granted, this is just one stage, so it's not fully representative of all the scenarios that Ryza would face, but it still provides some interesting insight on how different gear combinations impact Reisalyn. Also, each of these loadouts will use Ryza's fully upgraded augment module, the Sparkling Reverie, with apologies to our French listeners. I'm just going on like a full European pronunciation apology tour right now. By the way, to make the Sparkling Reverie, you will need to 100% clear the T1 stage. And then after that, you'll need to make sure that you've crafted the Golden Axe, the Blue Bomb Rod, and then the Divine Fishing Rod tools, so you will be able to harvest the rare items that you need in order to craft it. This gear triggers the skill Radiance at the start of a battle, which causes Ryza to activate a random skill from one of his Ox equipment, such as Slowdown, Senselessness, Maximum Wind, and Inflict Burns. Excellent, Smithers. I also upgraded my Sparkling Reverie to the max, which upgrades Ryza's Grand Chariot Red skill to Grand Chariot Plus. This allows Ryza to perform the Fatal Drive Grand Chariot skill after every second Shining Blast, which then fires a laser beam across the screen. Okay, so for the first loadout, we're going to use all standard gear plus the Sparkling Reverie. So for this setup, I use the triple 152 Mark 25 AP, as well as the 2 standard gear that the Ryza equipment emulates based on the event data mine, which would be the Quad Magnetic Torpedo and the Sextuple Bowforce AA gun. Basically, that's to make this as close to an apples-to-apples comparison as possible. And then for the Ox equipment, I used the 2 standard loadouts for light cruisers, which is the Repair Toolkit and the High Performance Hydraulic Steering Gear, or Washing Machine. And then all this equipment was upgraded to level 10. Now, without Ryza's special event gear, the first thing I noticed right away is her lack of a particular set of skills. With the exception of her yellow skill Alchemy Teacher, which triggers at the start of a fight, Ryza had no other skills trigger after that. Also glaring was the fact that she had 0 barrages, which is quite noticeable if you played Ryza with her special gear. Even her red skill Shining Blast did not fire off even once, despite having sufficient action points. That's because Fatal Blast only fires when an item attack hits an enemy, which is not possible for Ryza to do on her own without at least one of her special gear. And then no Fatal Blast also means that Ryza's Grand Chariot Plus laser will not fire off, even with a maxed out Sparkling Reverie Augment module equipped. And then no item attacks also means that Ryza can't trigger the 10% damage bonus from her yellow skill on her own. Just using standard equipment also makes Ryza's damage more inconsistent, especially in terms of her DPS. There were times when she would have pretty low damage numbers at the end of her skirmish because she takes so long to take down enemies that she's unable to get rid of them before the backline fires, and then that does most of the damage. In conclusion, Reisalyn equipped with just standard gear is pretty ordinary and underwhelming. Now let's go to loadout number 2, which has Ryza equipping all her special event gear plus the Sparkling Reverie. Mamma mia, look at all those skills! So after trying out Ryza with just a standard loadout, the most noticeable thing when switching to a loadout with the Grand Bomb, Laut Plagig, Crystal Ice Bomb, and Wirbel Luft is the number of skills and barrages that Ryza dishes out in the first 30 seconds. It's like 30 seconds to Mars. Or barrage hell. All in all, Ryza shoots out a combination of 14 skills or barrages in the first half minute of a fight. I repeat, Ryza uses 14 skills or barrages in the first 30 seconds. That's a lot! After doing multiple fights, I calculated that Ryza on average does anywhere between 33% to 40% more damage within the first 30 seconds of a fight, depending on the opponent or fleet that she's facing. I mean, that's a huge difference in damage. The main downside with Ryza, even with her equips all on, is that after those first 30 seconds, her damage kinda tails off significantly because she stops doing skills and barrages. I even had a fight which went over a minute, and after that 30-second mark, she never fired a single skill or barrage again. In that sense, she kind of turns into a Ryza with just standard gear after the first 30 seconds almost. However, the damage that she does do in those first 30 seconds is no joke. I mean, many times I've had her outdamage not just the front line, but even the back line, thanks to all those crazy barrages and skills that she dishes out in the first 30 seconds. By the way, here is the sequence of skills and barrages that Ryza dishes out during those first 30 seconds. Yeah, so when the battle starts, Ryza will automatically do 3 things. First off is Alchemy Teacher, which increases the crit rate of Ryza characters by 20%. This also causes item marked enemies to take 10% more damage, which actually synergizes quite well with not just Ryza, but other Ryza characters as well. And then after that, Ryza will trigger a random skill, thanks to the Sparkling Reverie's Radiance skill. And then any of these skills that she triggers will count as an item attack. That would then trigger the Shining Blast, which comes out when an enemy is hit by an item attack, as long as you have 6 action points available. And then 10 seconds after the start of battle, Ryza will trigger Inflict Burns from her Grand Bomb skill, which will cause a 5-second burn, And then this also triggers her second Shining Blast attack, which then triggers her first Grand Chariot Plus attack, which will shoot like a laser beam across the stage. And then 15 seconds after the start of a battle, Ryza will trigger Slowdown from the Crystal Ice Bomb, which slows the speed of enemies by 30% for 5 seconds, and then this triggers a third Shining Blast attack. And then 20 seconds after the start of battle, Ryza will trigger Senselessness from the Loadout Plagic Ox skill, which decreases the enemy crit rate by 10% for 5 seconds. This also triggers a fourth Shining Blast, which will then trigger your second Grand Chariot Plus laser attack. And then 25 seconds after the start of battle, Ryza will trigger Maximum Wind, which will then be followed by your fifth Shining Blast attack, which will then be followed by your fifth Shining Blast attack. And then last but not least, at the 30-second mark, Ryza will trigger the Core Drive 4-star Aurora attack, which you can only do when you're equipping the Grand Bomb, Crystal Ice Bomb, Loadout Plagic, and Wirbelluft together. All in all, it's a pretty crazy first 30 seconds, especially when you combine it with other Ryza characters, and you're just like seeing skills pop up everywhere. And then as far as Loadout 3, while Ryza equipped with her 4-event Ox gear seems head and shoulders above Ryza just using standard equipment, I thought what about if Ryza uses her essential special gear for the 2nd and 3rd slot, but uses standard gear for the 4th and 5th slot. So to see what that's like, I took out the Crystal Ice Bomb and the Wirbelluft, and replaced those with a washing machine and repair toolkit. The results were actually decent, but still not as good as when you equip all 4 of Ryza's special Ox gear. While Ryza is still able to trigger a good amount of skills, instead of shooting off 14 skills in 30 seconds, it's now down to 8 skills. So the loss of slowdown from the removal of Crystal Ice Bomb means that she has no more barrages at the 15-second mark, and then at the 20-second mark, she only does 2 skills, Senselessness and Shining Blast, but loses her second Grand Chariot since she is 1 Shining Blast attack short of triggering it. Ryza also loses access to her Core Drive 4-star Aurora attack from the Sparkling Reverie, even if you have the Sparkling Reverie equipped and maxed out. Damage is pretty much somewhere between Ryza with her 4 Ox equipment equipped, and just using standard equipment, so it's somewhere in the middle of both loadouts. Yeah, so all in all, it appears that using all 4 of Ryza's special equipment is the better option overall, at least in the stages that I tested. The difference is especially noticeable when fighting against Siren Elites, bosses, and 3-star Destroyer mobs. Do keep in mind that I tested primarily in event stages in a 1-1 configuration. My Ryza was also just under level 110 at the time of testing, so I didn't get to take her to World 13 or 14. I will say though that she is quite fun to use as part of a full Ryza fleet. You're just bombarded with skills from all the Ryza characters, and it's actually kind of hard to keep track of all the skill names popping up on the screen. The Ryza fleet is especially good against mobs, and I've even sent them out against like enemies when they were like under leveled by 10 or 15 levels while I was leveling them up, and they actually still did pretty good. I'm looking forward to certainly getting them to under 20 and then testing them at the later stages of the game. As always, if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. Once again, this is Tabi Asobi. Thank you for watching, and I wish you and your loved ones the best this holiday season.
これも指揮官さんのおかげだね。